Good morning. So my first rule, as I come from an outsider into any event like this, is to flatter my audience. So you all look beautiful. It's great to be here. Thank you very much, Dan and Alina, for inviting me to be part of your day. My name is Currie. As Dan said, I'm the Managing Director of NOBL in the UK and Europe, and we are a global change agency. So we help organisations like yours who are living amidst rapid change get good at responding to that change. And we have offices in New York and LA, San Francisco, Vancouver, and now London. And I have spent the last 10 years of my life helping people make change, primarily through the power of design. I'm a designer by background and trade. I was really inspired by the Adobe project that you shared. So I spent a lot of years applying design thinking to how people make products and services for clients like the NHS and the government, Adidas, HarperCollins. Then it became about applying design thinking to customers and services and experience. And that's called service design. And I co-founded one of the UK's leading service design agencies called Snook, which I left a few years ago for many reasons, but one of them being, no matter how brilliant your product is, how brilliant your campaign or your service is, you always butt up against institutional dysfunction. You butt up against politics and team dynamics that mean brilliant ideas die in the ash heap of history. So now I'm obsessed by what happens when you apply design thinking to how our organisations work and compete. And at NOBL, we call that organisational design. So I'm known as Red Jotter online. If any of you are avid Twitterers in the room, then do connect with me on there. My mum does read my tweets, so do be kind. So I'm here to talk to you today about change. So what does every leader want for Christmas? If I could wave a magic wand for each of you, what would you ask for? Probably you would ask for the situation to happen where you go back to the ranch and you tell your teams, we are changing to a new direction that will make us more purposeful, make us stronger, and make us faster. And your people will execute perfectly based on this vision. Does this ever happen? No. Why is change so hard? Is it a loss of pride, control, familiarity? How do we lead change in an authentic, human, and effective way? Now, I'm going to give away all my secrets, but before we do that, we're going to have a little experiment. So on your tables are red envelopes. And I'd like each of you to take an envelope and open it. So unfortunately, there are no cash in these envelopes. There are no prizes. What you will find is 2 corks. 1 synthetic cork and 1 natural cork. Now, this is not a trick question. There's no right or wrong. I want you to feel the corks, hold them in your hands. And based on what you know, choose the one that you prefer. Gut instinct is good. Don't overthink it. Does everybody have an opinion? Okay, so in a moment, I'd like you to turn to your neighbour and make the case for why your choice of cork is superior. Who would like to share their strong opinion or their average opinion? Anybody? Dan, yeah. Why have you chosen the cork you have?
My friend Jeff, just to my left, he came up with two crackers. One is the natural cork is all around storytelling and everything that storytelling holds. And the synthetic one just seemed to be a bit of an intrusion.
Okay, so we have...
We both agreed on that.
Okay. So storytelling on one hand, intrusion in the other. Anybody else got an opinion they'd like to share? Yeah.
We talked about the traditional cork as well, and it was, I guess, the craftsmanship, the history that comes with it. We also talked about the fact that they have to now be sustainable, so yes. The environment versus...
Exactly. So we have sustainability versus craftsmanship. Yeah.
Yeah, so, sometimes the cork is just a cork. Our table, from Joy, picked up the real natural one. For the same reasons, it feels like natural, you know that, and all that stuff. But from Joy, they said, you know what, this one, the real one, it just feels like it has too many problems. But the synthetic one is smooth, easy to open. So I found it actually quite compelling.
Excellent, thank you for sharing. Now, I'm no sommelier, but I have been doing my homework on corks. And legend has it that 17th century monk Dom Perignon first used a natural cork all those decades ago, and it has dominated the industry ever since. It's undoubtedly a beautiful, effective, valuable solution, yet we have cork taint. Hands up if you've ever had cork taint. It's a common thing, and it happens when a fungus called TCA is either in the cork or around the cork, and this happens in between 1 and 13% of bottles. Ruins the whole bottle, undrinkable. It's the Russian roulette of wine. So what does an industry do? Of course, we throw money and people at this problem. We build research and development teams. People go to work, and out pops a new technology, the synthetic cork, which is cheaper and doesn't cause cork taint. Amazing progress. But let's imagine for a second that we're the winemakers. On one hand, you have a very practical solution to a big problem. On the other hand, just as some of you were, you're questioning the tactile experiences that your customers have. You're questioning the value of upholding the tradition of a very traditional industry. And you're asking questions about, can synthetic even stand the test of time? Do we even know the answers to that? So without knowing the answers, based on your instinct, we're going to have a vote. So in a moment, I want you to keep the cork that you prefer close to your chest. This is the cork that you would use if you had a winery. Do any of you have a winery? No. So if you do, we should chat later. Okay, so everybody's holding on to their preferred cork. Now, I have not cleared this with Alina and Dan. I hope they trust me this will go well. In a moment, without causing harm or injury, I would like you to throw the cork that you discarded towards me, towards the stage, and at the end, we'll see where we stand. Okay. Everyone safe? Excellent. Okay, so in your roles, most of you are in the business of selling synthetic corks. You have huge opportunity, you have really exciting futures, but it's really not easy. It feels difficult at times, and that's why we're here today. And the experiment that we just did was to show us that even when change makes lots of sense for millions of reasons, when the change is clearly the future, there will always be legitimate, functional, there will always be legitimate value and function and beauty in the thing that's gone before. So when it comes to human beings and change, there is always nuance. Now, this is a photograph of a cork from a big jar of corks I have at home, and me and my partner like to write on them and keep them when we have a special moment. So that might be a birthday or an anniversary. And even me, as a complete change junkie, and I totally get the case for the synthetic cork, I do feel a bit sad if I imagine my jar being full of synthetic corks, because it just wouldn't be the same. Our collection would be different, and I would feel a sense of loss. And I hope that you feel that tension with me. Because in your role as instigators of change, as the purveyors of synthetic corks, you will meet this tension often, regularly. You will meet resistance. Hands up if you have ever felt resistance. Keep your hand up if you've ever resisted. No judgment here. Exactly, it's complex. And resistance, at its very best, will slow the pace of change right down. At its very worst, it will decimate a company and your career. And I have seen this happen lots of times before. And it comes in lots of shapes and sizes. Often it can look like outright defiance and defense. But sometimes not, because people in their infinite wisdom have come up with lots of ways to resist change, and often it's small, subversive behavior. Things like turning up to meetings late, or just not turning up at all. Things like gossip through the grapevine, whispers behind people's backs, and of course, a high turnover of people. It can also look like a celebration of the past and all the things associated with the past. One of our clients is an e-commerce startup, and they felt this acutely when they were acquired. The acquisition was a brilliant deal. They were more powerful together. People got paid, lots of good things. But 6 months in, employees were still harping on about the good old days when they were small and autonomous. And of course, reminiscing is fine, but not when it undermines the future. And if our partner wants to talk about their ex, we'd maybe let them away with that once or twice. But if that was becoming a daily habit, we'd probably have to have a sit-down chat about that. It can also look like attempts to brand change as flavour of the month, the new sexy fad. I'm always amazed how long people get away with calling something a fad. It can also be a game of chicken, especially for senior people in organisations. How long can I get away with not changing? It can look like a stalling technique. Whoa, I need more time. I need more information. I don't feel able to make a decision with the information I have. It can sound like, well, I'm just trying to be realistic. I don't think we've got the time for this. And often the worst, silence. And every single one of you doing the type of work that you do, you're going to come up against this resistance in all of those shapes and forms. You are up against inertia. And I really believe that the key is about understanding why that's so hard. And I think it's because change feels like loss. So there's an old saying that the only people who really love change are wet babies, because they are wildly uncomfortable and they want things to be different. Now, for better or worse, people in organisations, the majority of people, are shielded and protected from this existential crisis that people like you face. Because on one hand, you know how fragile businesses actually are, and on the other hand, you know how difficult it is to keep up with culture and trends. And also for leaders that we work with, change actually feels very positive, and I definitely feel that vibe this morning from Alina and your colleagues, that it feels almost like safety because it's visionary and it's about differentiation and it's about speeding ahead of the competition. And those things feel good. But to those on the ground, the ones who often have to do the work of changing others, or those who are being changed, it can often feel acutely like loss. So in our work at Nobel, we found that there are 6 kinds of loss that people experience and anticipate through change. So the first one, loss of control. If people aren't invited into the process of change, if they're not part of that experience, then it will feel like something that's happening at them or to them, as opposed to with them. Even in the most positive and brilliant of contexts, a lack of control is such a salient negative emotion that will always override the rest. We work with one leader who used to tell us a story of even if she tried to give all of her people an £100 bonus, they would complain that she didn't give it to them in 10 and £20 notes. Loss of pride. So this is about pride of the past, feeling proud of what you've built. And remember, it's a really great thing that your people feel proud of the work that they're doing, that they feel proud that they're contributing to your organisation's purpose. This is how it should be. But unfortunately, too many leaders make the mistake of cheerleading the future at the expense of the past. So we're no longer doing that thing. That thing's done. We're now doing this thing, this new shiny great thing. But all of your people made that thing. We met a client recently who had brought in a new VP of design, and at the project kickoff, she invited both the old VP of design and the new VP into the same session. And she started off the session by welcoming the new hire, proclaiming her enthusiasm that he was here because the department was broken. Now imagine what it felt like to be that old VP. And even though the intention was great, it really didn't feel good. And that sentiment spread throughout the whole of the department. People were unhappy that a leader they respected had gone, and they felt as if all of the work that they'd done to date was being labelled as ineffective. Loss of narrative. So at work, this is about the discussions that you've had and the points of view that you've fought passionately for. The stories that you've delighted yourself in telling your team about. We work with a VP of marketing for a large fashion brand, and she was a real key stakeholder in the company shifting from print to digital. And she knew that that was the right way for the company to go, even though prior to that, she'd convinced the CMO to expand the whole print team. The story she told for years and years was that print was king. And now all of a sudden, she had to change her party line. And that's hard. Loss of time. Definitely don't need to share with you the pain of this one. And this is often, when we work with teams and leaders, this is the advice that they hate the most, because we always say to them, any type of change you're introducing requires more work. It always does. And that means that you need to take work off somewhere else. Now, usually they laugh at us and tell us that that's absolutely impossible. And of course, we make do. But you must remove other things from your people's plates if you're asking them to do new things. Otherwise, you're asking them to choose between your new thing and sleep, or your new thing and seeing their friends and family. So the change that you desire must be made to be part of the day job. Otherwise, chaos can occur. One of our clients was promoted into a new strategic role. We were thrilled for them. They'd really worked hard to get in that position. And in the first week of work, she was told that she was expected to deliver on all the functions of her previous role, as well as this new role. 2 full-time jobs. So he was stuck having to choose between the new thing and staying sane and healthy. And you don't want an overworked, overtired person leading the strategy of your organization. Loss of competence. So this is particularly relevant for all of you here today because you are pushing boundaries and you're innovating. And when you are asking people to innovate, by definition, you're asking them to move away from their expertise. Now, understandably, all of us, me included, we like to feel that we're good at our job. That's a fundamental part of being human. And if your culture is particularly results-driven, performance-orientated, then it's no wonder that people will resist a change. So, question for you. What percentage at work do you feel like you know exactly what you're doing? 100%, 90%, 80%, 70%, 60, 50 or less. Now, of course, it's subjective, but for evolving industries that we work with, we always advise that we would like to see no higher than 70. Because that means you're working outside of your comfort zone and you're continually being challenged and learning. But when you go to 50% or less, now, I get that some people dig that. I'm probably one of these people. But we're the minority. For most people, being at less than 50 feels drastically uncomfortable. And it will lead to them questioning, am I even in the right role? I'm just going to sit here and do this and hope that people around about me think I know what I'm doing. They'll start to question if they're even at the right company. Loss of familiarity. Humans have spent their entire existence trying to predict the future. Whether that be the weather or stock markets or who's going to win the league, it's in our DNA. We find comfort in knowing what's going to happen next. Change and everything we've talked about this morning disrupts that. We worked with a creative agency who was mid-merger, facing a real downturn in morale because the change around the merger had been led so poorly. But the narrative from the people was, well, how long is it going to take for this to feel normal again? When's it going to feel like what it used to feel like? And the exhaustion won over the promise of something new and exciting. So there we have our 6. And I'm sure you're asking yourself, well, what does that mean? Like, what do we do with all that? So firstly, we have to get it in our heads very firmly that we will approach change with authenticity and vulnerability. Now, your instinct will go against that. Mine often does. Your instinct will be to explain. But this is why it's visionary, and this is why it's brilliant. And if your people resist, well, you'll just explain again, maybe louder, maybe in a grander venue. And you do this because you don't want people to ask questions you don't know the answer to. At worst, it might be a snap of, well, people just need to get on with it because this is their job. They're being paid to do this. But what leaders often forget is that the change that you're persuading is something that you've known about for months, maybe even years. In fact, you're really used to the idea now. And you get to, you often come to events like this. And your peers are also people who are going through that similar change. You probably had a choice in it, or it might even have been your idea in the first place. But for lots of your teams and your employees back at your HQ, announcements of change, shifts in direction, come with zero context. They've not been on that journey. They've not had time to get used to the idea. They've not had time to really let it sink in. Now, you can make change happen in an instant. Like, it happens all the time in our lives. Births, marriages, death. In organizations, it can look like the official day of the reorg. It can look like a day where the CEO makes an announcement at an all-hands meeting. Transition feels different to that. Transition is about behavior change. It's a process. And there are 3 distinct steps to that transition. And this was first outlined by William Bridges in the 80s. Now, the first is an ending. It's about coming to terms with what we're losing. The second is adjustment, where you're kind of in that in-between zone, where you're happy with where you're going and you're kind of getting there, but you're still hesitant. Only in the third circle is where something new starts. Guess where most leaders want to start? The beginning, of course. It's so much sexier over there than it is here. It's incredibly tempting to jump to the beginning. It's a bit like, if you lost your grandmother, somebody saying, but hey, think of the inheritance. When actually all you needed was a, goodness, I'm so sorry for your loss. And the antidote is to move through each step in order. Do what so few people do, honor the loss. Have a ceremony for the past. The client that I told the print story about, she did a beautiful thing during that change and actually ordered some of the team's favourite print designs to be framed along the corridors so that they could still feel that pride, even in this new context. Ben & Jerry's have got a graveyard for all the flavours of ice cream that didn't make it. It's online and offline, you can check it out. And when you're faced with thinking about adjustment, it's about really staring face on who's losing what, having that conversation, and making a plan. And then when you're in the third box and you're beginning, and it's the new thing, your only job is to celebrate early and often. You want to paste your walls with positive feedback from your customers, from your clients. You want to bring in crowns for the teams who are doing the best work. So I hope each of you still have your cork. Now, it doesn't really matter if it's synthetic or natural. Do you all still feel good about the decision you made? Good. So I want you to take this cork back to the office. It won't have any wine on it, so hopefully people will know it wasn't that type of conference. Put it on your desk and let it be a reminder to start any form of change with an ending. Memorialize the incredible work that you and your teams have done to date, so that when you're ready to make the next change, your people are going to be right there with you, ready for what's next. Thank you very much for listening.